Hello, everyone. In Flesh and Blood, value just isn't found in the pitch points. It's in binders, buyouts, and back alley trades. Whether you're hunting cold foils or flipping majestics, one wrong move can cost you more than a misplayed Command and Conquer. In this episode of Tunic Counter Gamers, we talk the Flesh and Blood economic ecosystem of buying, selling, and trading Flesh and Blood cards. Now, you might notice our hosts are a little bit different because they're at Nationals, but I gathered the Black Market crew, the wheelers and dealers of our local community, right? I have our Noah from Siblings and Cardboard, the podcast, and I have Sinclair from the Big TCG Show podcast. They're both here to represent and talk all about the Flesh and Blood marketplace. This is episode 12, the market side of Flesh and Blood. We always start with what we'd learned since last week, since we are a learning journey podcast. So, who wants to go first on this?
Pick me. First of all,
go ahead and introduce yourself, and then wrap into what you learned last week.
I'm Big Max, aka Noah, or Noah, aka Big Max from Siblings and Cardboard. See well every weekend at Armory, usually. A little more now than recently, but I guess something I've learned a little bit in the last week. I think Gravy Bones is a way better deck than I initially thought. I think he's still going to have some pitfalls, but playing sealed events against him, the deck is really strong. I mean, even in newer player hands, the value of the allies just cannot be understated, and the big boats. Like, it just feels like such a good dynamic. The cards block well, so definitely a force to be reckoned with. You don't want to give Gravy time to get to that later board state. You really want to beat the brakes off him if you can, which is hard to do. But I definitely learned that. So you don't want to do the whole trade thing. You really need to be ahead against Gravy.
Very cool. And Sinclair, what did you go ahead and introduce yourself, and what did you learn since last week?
Okay. All right. I'm from the Big TCG Show. My name's Sinclair. What I learned from last week is Prism is really good in the Gravy Bones. Now, when it comes to allies, I learned that, if allies attacking an ally, you can't really block, which is good for me to learn at the local scene versus learning at, Memphis or, in Charlotte. You really don't want to kind of learn a ruling in a bigger event. One of the things I realized is minus, the scalpers, is the high seas market is not acting the way all the other sets kind of did. You would think that even though Watery Grave got reprinted in one, which I told you it would. Will I said there'll probably be one in there.
We were both talking about.
You would have thought it would have.
Go on.
It didn't drop as much as I thought it was going to, which I was kind of happy about. Yeah. That way you can make that moolah, but at the same time, I feel like it probably would have been better for newer players if the deck had two of them. But it is what it is. We just kind of have to wheel and deal with that at this current moment.
Yeah, I think when me and you, Sinclair, were talking about the Call to the Grave reprint in the Armory deck, right? And we were thinking it wouldn't be 3 of, because Heist was reprinted as 1 of in Max. And I was like, well, that screams that screams Call to the Grave for me as well. But you're right, it didn't drop in value as much as we thought it would. So, good point.
I just think this year is going to be extremely weird, in my opinion.
Fair points. And what I learned since last week was this is my first time at going 3-0 in our Tuesday Armory. This is my 3rd time overall since I've been playing for the year and a half. Fang is strong, y'all. He's probably one of the stronger warriors. I've done pretty well with him, and it really is getting those reps in against the different matchups. I've learned to really kind of dial it in and use my sideboard more effectively, and that's always been a benefit. I also learned that pre-release is always fun. It's not really a learning thing, but it's fun in the way where if you have nothing on the line, you could really kind of like get spicy in the kitchen, if you would. And it's fun to see how different people cook up different ways of the deck and seeing what naturally other players think about. And when you talk tech with them, if they come to the same conclusion you did. So, all good things. Now, before we talk about the marketplace, right, I want to put timestamps down below because I'm interested, and some of our viewers are, is how did you guys start in Flesh and Blood? Now, this is something that I always ask every person that comes on this cast that's not one of the OG cast members, because that's important. Like, so what was your start story? What was your origin story? Or in Noah's case, your villain story. I'm just joking, Noah. He's beat me several times with his Azalea deck, so he's my villain. Anyways, Noah, what's your origin story here? How did you start Flesh and Blood?
That's not how that works, by the way. Okay, no, Thomas got me into. So my fellow sibling Thomas, that's always on there with me, actually got me into it. I mean, I've always been a card game fan. I would play Magic online, MTG Arena. I was a pretty much red deck wins or Esper player, so literal scum of the earth. And I would be playing BL1, smashing spacebar, all the way to high ranks. So I mean, I played a few like day invitational things and that, but like nothing serious. And then he was like, "Oh, you got to play this card game." So, I mean, Thomas is the one that got me into it. I love Flesh and Blood in that way of like the sort of like villain or kind of nemesis. In fact, Donnie was kind of my nemesis. I mean, the first time I ever met him at Armory, he mopped the floor with me with Dash. It was kind of the first time I saw such a wide deck, and like I just didn't understand how to play against it as Dory. So, I was on a huge losing streak, like most every new Flesh and Blood player goes on. But then when I finally beat him one time, like it was the happiest day of my life. Mm-hmm. And so it was like a cute little like he was like my Gary, like he was my rival for a minute. And then obviously Thomas has always been somebody that we test every once in a while, and obviously we play against. But I mean, it was him. And then I just love collecting things. Like I've collected cards of the past, Pokemon and things like that. So I just hold on to things. I'm a sentimental type of person.
And so, again, and Sinclair, what was your origin story? Like, I mentioned you several times on this podcast before about spicy tech with Prism, that yellow pummel in the Prism deck. I can't remember what episode I mentioned it in, but I mentioned it twice because it's such a unique twist. And I definitely know I mentioned it when Paul was on our cast. So what was your origin story? I noticed that you stuck with Prism a lot, but you kind of dabbled with other characters as well. But how did you start Flesh and Blood?
My origin is I worked at a local game store called Game Castle. So they're a franchise from California, and I worked at the very first one on the East Coast in Greenville, South Carolina. So I was the weekend night time shift person, and it was my job to learn how to play every card game. So when new people would come in, I had to teach them at least the fundamentals of the rules. So, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, the original Meta Zoo, Dragon Ball Super, and then eventually I got Flesh and Blood. So one of my collector buddies taught me, he's like, "Oh, try this game. Oh, you like dragons? Here." He handed me a Draw My deck, and then I like Draw My. And I said, "Okay, I want to play something other than just dragons." So I bought the Fight It since that was the only other one we had. So I started with those two heroes. And then after I learned the rules and played with them a couple of times, I'm like, I like how this game is different. It was just like the rest of my shift, I was just thinking about, I want to play this game again. So I started teaching other people in South Carolina Flesh and Blood. And then just, I'm poaching Magic players. And I just got in that way. The reason I stick with Prism is I don't have that much time these days to play like I used to. I was extremely competitive since 2002 in card games. But when you have a kid, you got to change diapers and everything. So,
but you use it to harvest its organs, right? So you could buy more Flesh and Blood. No, I'm just joking, guys.
No, I got a twin for that. Okay, it's $4 million for their organs. But yeah, that's why y'all would see me. Maybe I come for like 3 weeks in a row, and I'll be gone for like 2 or 3 months. It's just, baby duty. I love that little dude. So it led me into, okay, let me at least pay attention to the market, and I started buying cards when they're cheap, and then I got back into just, reselling some of the Marvels I got. That way I could just keep playing this game in the future. And then I really liked what LSS did. Like, the thing was, what LSS is currently doing, my play group predicted a company doing that. And we're like, if someone were to do X, Y, and Z, that game, no matter what it is, would shoot up to the hilltop after a while. So that's pretty much how I got into the game. And I realized that the market is drastically different, and it's very interesting on how everything.
Well, you kind of mentioned a good point. Like, it's always fun when you could self-fund your own hobby. Like, you buy low, sell high, or trade high, and really could fund this expensive game that we call Flesh and Blood. Now, mind you, you can buy budget decks and you can get in the game kind of at a lower cost level, but eventually you're going to have to pony up some cash, right? And how do you do that? And I know, even the cards you get from the gem packs, you could will and deal those just as easy, especially if they're playable full art microtext cards, right? Just as easy to kind of get those Command and Conquers eventually, right? Because when they first come out, the prices are super high before they get
Mhm.
saturated in the market, right? So that I love the natural segue. Thank you, Sinclair. Because now, before we begin into the actual market, the ins and outs, I have to ask you guys: have you ever made a trade regret? Where you just gave away a card that might have spiked, or you traded a card away and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, has that ever happened to you guys? No.
Yes and no.
Okay. I will go first. I traded away a playset of Shelter of the Storms from when the Hunt first came out because I thought certainly this card will not stay at 80, 90, $100. Right? So I was like, I'm just going to trade it high, $80, $90, and I'm going to buy it when it's back low, 50, $60 maybe, or trade for it, right? So that way I'll get a 10, 20, $30 profit. Didn't happen that way. I still don't have Shelter of the Storms. And I opened up a playset eventually over the course of the time of opening Hunted, and I traded away, and that price never came back down. So I'm still waiting.
I know
But
that was hurting. I know that was hurting.
yeah. How about you guys? Anything like that?
I don't think I ever regret necessarily a trade. I mean, you always have that feeling of sometimes like, oh, I sell a card and like, eventually its ceiling goes through the roof. But like that's the nature of Flesh and Blood. We can always talk about that. I use those words a lot, but I mean, we talk about floor and ceiling as skill level as well, or high roll ability. But it works for price. So there's always a floor for a card, and then there's a ceiling. The problem is you never know what the ceiling is in Fab until you know what the playability is. And sometimes those two things don't happen right when the card comes out. So I think personally, there's probably been a couple of like sales where, you're like, man, if only I rode the wave a little bit, but I usually don't worry about that. If there's ever a floor involved where I feel like I have to move a card at a price, I do my best to, but there's times where I just take hits because there's more to it than the short term. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of have to have that balance. I'll make the margins on the things that I got really lucky on, or I have a bunch of potentially open, whatever, and then I will seed some of that elsewhere where we're talking about, getting people cards and things like that. And so we'll get into that because I know one of the questions you wanted to ask was like, how do we price singles? And so that's kind of how I do that. But we can get to that. But no. Now, a buddy of mine did trade me a Fabled CNC. He gave me my playset. I had to beg him to do it. I had to beg him. And I bought him like the most wonderful dinner as a thank you for it. But I gave him a Marvel Leviathan and a couple other things he was missing from his collection. He's a collector. He keeps one of everything. And I said, please, that's my last one. I got 2 Fables. You'll give me my playset. And I was like, it's even in a dark inner sleeve. I was like, it's perfect. Your card literally matches the other 2 I have. So I guess he kind of regretted it because he's like, look at Marvel Leviathan, look at Fabled CNC. And I'm like, look, thank you so much. That's one of the ones where I got really favorable in terms of the value over time. And that's why we can talk about it with the Olympia. You know what I mean? That's why I kind of wheel and deal that way. I don't always do that, but there's a unclaimed value that these cards have.
Yeah. And how about you, Sinclair? Any trades you ever regretted?
So I regretted 2 trades at the time I made them. The most recent one was I traded a bunch of Magic stuff to get my last 2 white border CNCs. I'm like, all right, I gotta have this card. I broke down like 10 commander decks, and then I never traded at like 50%. Where I'm from, all the stores do 60, and so I did that, and I got happy because after that, that's when the Magic market kind of crashed, and everything I had traded away just tanked in value. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And then the last one, the very first time I did a trade was back in 2008. I traded maybe like a stack of cards about like this big for a crush card, which was $300 at the time. But then I made all my money back because I used it so I could go play on like the money circuit. So I made all my money back and then rebought all those cards from that guy. But other than that, I don't really worry about if a card is gonna like tank, because once I have my playset, If I have like an extra, I'll look at the market and go, oh, okay, you're $1. I'll put you in later on. But if you're like 5 and up, I'll go ahead, put you in my inventory, and then whatever it sells for, it sells for.
Yeah.
Because I always calculate in the price of my envelopes, stamps, and even the time to drive over to mail it off to the post office.
Yeah.
That's a huge point. And just to segue, and I don't want to get on a tangent about it, I think a lot of people, it's a little different for LGSs and other stores. I mean, I know there's some people that sell the commons, rares, things like that. Like, I am one person. I don't have the time to do that, and I work a full-time job and things like that. So this is more of just like, I have a bunch of cards, I try and get them to whoever needs them. And so I don't want to flood myself with 80,000 orders. Like, I could never deal with that. So I don't usually get into the lower dollar value cards and price them to sell the dollars and things like that. One, it does kind of cut it close with like supplies and things like that. But two, I'm more than happy to sell them locally. Do you know what I mean? Like, whatever the price may be on TCG Player and all that, like, that's a placeholder for inventory. The idea is I don't need to wake up to 25 orders that I also have to then go to. Like, it feels bad because I want to get them done, and I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be a wild ride. So that's just like me personally, but I think a lot of people don't take into account, if it's like just a normal person's trying to sell an extra copy, the logistics behind that. So, $1, $2 card, sure, I'll trade them locally, sell them locally, but it's a little harder online.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I just reopened up my store and woke up to 30 orders, and I'm just like, oh no. Let me close this back up real quick.
That's funny.
Like,
it's daunting for one person.
Yeah.
It is, and the only reason I started selling like bulk and stuff online is at the time when, I would say right before my son was born, the job I was at, they ended up laying everybody off. So I was at home for 6 months with my son. So I was like, okay, he can't do anything. Put him on a little pillow and he goes to sleep. And I'm just like, well, I got all this bulk. Let me just try to get rid of it and just put it online just to have something to do. And now it's like I can use it, buy toys and stuff, extra diapers. But for anybody that realistically wants to like sell bulk, my honest opinion is, before you even start doing it, at least sort everything by like color or type of card and go ABC. You don't have to necessarily go by like sets or anything. If you really want to, it'll take you a lot longer. I say just keep it simple.
Yeah. All right. So have you ever got, like, you were talking about bulk. Have you ever got like a market surprise, like a swift kick in the ass, and you're like, oh my gosh, this bulk rare, not Majestic, not Marvel, not a Fable, all of a sudden it's skyrocketed in price, where you bought it for pennies on the dollar, and all of a sudden it's flipping for dollars on end. And I could say Sink Below, but that's kind of been a gradual trend. But there's other rares out there that, even in the hunted, I think Noah on the Market Minute in Siblings and Cardboard, you mentioned a rare that all of a sudden was from pennies to dollars, right? Has that ever, like, have you guys ever been market surprised by that, or is it something you kind of saw coming?
No. So like rares and commons and things like that are always usually like wild for me. I say I look at the market a lot, but I mean, I go by best selling page on TCG Player a lot, or MinMax puts out a report, or various other things. I go look at Stackswell and all the other creators, Fluke and Blocks, they put out videos, Sloop, things like that. Like, that's the best way to kind of get the overall view. But in terms of rares and commons, like, it's so far down the best selling page usually that, like, by the time you find it, Blade Beckoner Gauntlet's the card you're talking about. Apparently it has play outside of the whole Project Blue, but there's also Project Blue that's kind of caused rares in cold foil specifically and some commons to go up. Now people are evaluating these commons and rares, like, how good is this in this limited, you know what I mean, in Project Blue, which is like on like the huge like hush hush apparently, but I mean, it's out there. So the other card that I think I was most surprised by was actually Yellow Shred from Outsiders, and I never bought the card. Like, I didn't go buy it in mass or anything like that, or try and get it at pennies, but I bought a lot of Outsiders.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that Shred was like $8 for a normal rare, I was like, what's going on? I was like, I have like 4,000 of these because I've opened up
Oh,
so
yeah,
much
right?
hunted. So,
Remember that.
yeah, and
Right.
people at locals and stuff like that were like, hey, we need yellow shreds. We need yellow shreds. And it's like, I was like, well, here we go. You know, it's like, this is kind of why I keep rares and foils as best I can. And usually like a couple play sets of commons. But I do my best to hold rares and foils because we are a Yu-Gi-Oh! S card game where at any drop of or any day of the week, a card can become scarce just due to not being in circulation and or now become in use because a card way in the future has brought a card way in the past back up.
And you mentioned that a lot about cards in circulation. Like, I know the biggest thing you say sometimes is, this set is not in print anymore. Go out, get your play set. I don't care if it's common or rare, so you need this play set, right, in order to actually be able to produce effects from your deck going forward. I know that's something you really advocate in the Siblings of Cardboard podcast. So,
Well, I mean, think about it, right? If it's a competitive card game and the way that usually cards get sold out is when they lose their playability, which is kind of how people usually circulate their cards out of their deck, right? I take my weakest links out. Maybe you move them because weakest links are really high and then you'll pick them back later when they're more meta, right?
yeah.
Eventually, the product that's coming out of it isn't being opened where new people are adding weakest links. It's the same weakest links being passed back around, just at different times of the peaks and valleys in the market, right? And so sometimes there's just not going to be another like wave of them going on. Eventually there'll be people that are kind of holding them. They're like, I don't really want to get rid of my weakest links. But then all of a sudden the price hike comes and they go, well, if I sell them at now, I can at least, get them later perhaps if they go down, and or now I can pivot to this deck that I wanted to play that I needed extra funds on.
So you're saying everything has a price.
Yeah, everything has a price, and the unrealized price is the real thing about Fab. I think that's something that I try not to get too crazed about, because if you like, the ceilings, whatever it could be, well, I mean, it may never get there, and why would you necessarily want it to get there? So, I think there's a happy medium in terms of like card pricing, and we could talk a little bit more about that with High Seas because I know there's a lot of clamoring going on about the pricing and obviously the Hunted 2.0 scarce product that's floating around.
Right. And Sinclair, did you want to put any input on this one? I know you will deal too, and you do a lot of rare sales, and you buy bulk, dude. I mean, you're the only one I know locally that buys bulk to sell bulk, online or through other means like Discord or Facebook, which we'll cover in a second. But like, have you ever had this example happen?
I would say it's about every other day when it's like a common or a rare and it's shot up. And it's not even just Fab. It's just the tournaments in general. It's back to what Noah said. We're a Yu-Gi-Oh! S card game. So what I decided to do to help the locals out, I don't post foil rares anymore. Like, I slowly will build up a play set, wait for one of you guys to say, hey, I need this foil. I'd rather one of y'all get it because in the future, like you said with Yellow Shred, it'll shoot to the moon.
Yeah.
And looking back at some of the older Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards I sold will make me think, okay, well, this X card in Fab is the same as this. It has the same effect. It's had the same impact. 5 years from now, it'll go up. Yeah. Let me just get a bunch of those and sit and wait. I would, for anybody watching, I would say if you find a Majestic you think is good and it's $1, just buy your 3, sit and wait. It's a lot better to get it now, and if it never becomes good, you got $3, or it goes to like 10, 20, 30. Now you got to shell out 9. It's just like, oh, I should have bought it when it was cheap.
Dude. Preach, brother. Like, I'm telling you, man.
It's like, okay, I was watching Noah's podcast, and he's the sole reason why I'm like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and buy a playset of every Majestic. Let me just start cheap, work my way up. And now when I'm watching the market watches, I'm like, okay, if I calculate it, I've maybe saved like $3,000 in just buying cards because I got it. The last one is, what is it? It's that new Guardian card that just came out with the little mountain with the little swirling.
Roiling Vortex.
Yes. So I bought 3 of those when it was dirt cheap. And I told Will, I said, William, man, you need to get it now while it's cheap. And now they're like what, $8 a piece.
Dude,
And
I regret because I got busy when you were saying
There
about
it
the rolling
is.
fisher.
yeah, roller
Yeah,
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 my bad. Fissure.
It wasn't,
yeah.
It
it
looks like
was
a vortex.
Well, it looks like a
it,
butthole, is what it looks
yeah,
like.
It's channel mount butthole to the community, but which is great. It's a good
Yeah.
name. Like don't get it twisted, LSS.
Sinclair, you did mention buying this card, and I was like, I'm gonna go home and buy it, and I forgot to purchase it, and then $8 was
well,
like, damn.
and it wasn't me just thinking I'm gonna
Yeah.
buy this card randomly. I was looking at what the community was talking about. Everyone was hyped up about high seas. Oh, we're getting pirates. And I was like, okay, well, let me go ahead. As LL is about to LL, let me go ahead and get Ranger stuff because it has no hype behind it. Prices have tanked. It's at the bottom. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's the next pack? Oh, it's going to be Guardian stuff. Well, I
Yeah.
might want to play Guardians, and I only have a few Guardian cards. So I said, let me just go ahead and start buying Guardian stuff before everybody talks about it, before High Seas comes out. And that's how I was able to ride that wave. Now, it doesn't always work, but I'm just real happy I got them, man. You should have hit that buy button, man.
Well, even if it works 60 or 70% of the time, you're going to get cards that are playable, which is, I think, what I've heard is the common thread. Like, first, work on your playset. If you're going to naturally play the cards, get your playset while they're cheap, right? Why not? They're going to eventually become
Yeah.
relevant. And then what I'm hearing is maybe if you have a little bit of extra cash flow, you pick up the cards that you speculate might go. It still could work within your class card, but maybe it might be like you don't play Guardian, but you might be Guardian interested. And then you pick up, you know, Rolling Fisher, right? Or Channel Mount Butthole, whatever the community calls it. But you know,
Yeah,
so
that's what
that
we're going to call it. Channeling butthole.
yeah, so that's one of those things like, you know, that, and I know I like, you know, they call me a whale, but really it's because I will and deal based off the feedback I get from you guys. Like, okay, well, this card's obviously going to be gathering interest as far as monetary value goes, so I might as well pick up my playset. And I don't mind trading them out. Now, sometimes I get burnt, like I said earlier, with the shelter from the storm, or most of the time I actually make a profit and I trade in positive value, right? So, like, all good information.
So
So, go ahead, Sinclair.
speaking of getting burnt, and I'll use this. I'll use myself as an example. Back before Zen and all them came out, I decided, okay, let me try a buyout.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, let me get something cheap. Let me get something foil. I literally bought all these predatory streaks because Zen was going to use Crouching Tiger, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, and I looked at his effect, and I was like, oh, Crouching Tiger is about to go up, and then I figured, okay, well, Art of War is really high and really hard to get. If I get the foils, I'm thinking they might go to 50 cents, which they did not. So you can, I've spent maybe like $10 on 79 copies. So
You have
doing
79
this,
copies? I'm sorry, let me just repeat that
I
real
got
quick.
literally 79 copies of the foils.
Right. I think that's as much as Noah has on Vipox. So,
Whoa, I have like 36 copies of
okay.
Vipox. That's a personal love. Peter collects Dawn Blades, I collect Vipoxes because one day that card is going to be so relevant. Everybody's going to be like, "What?" And I'll be just wait. I promise. There's no guarantees. But
Yeah.
like that's kind of the fun about it too. I mean, there's
Yeah.
absolutely no guarantee that card, I like to say every card's going to have its day, and I believe they're going to attempt to. But I am, like I said, I'll refer to it as a million times. This is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any other card game that keeps its card pool completely in scope to be able to play. You just never know.
Yeah. But sorry,
And
Sinclair, go ahead, man. You know, I went off a tangent here on Vipox, but go ahead. You were saying?
I have an example for what Noah just said. There was a useless fusion monster with only 2 printings. Now, mind you, Konami is very liberal on how they print. LSS is not. So if something has 1 printing, and in 10 years from now, that card becomes meta relevant, it's going to shoot to the moon. So this card was maybe worth a penny for like 15 years. All of a sudden, it jumps up to like $5. Where I worked at, Corner Magic, we had maybe 30 copies and we had like 400 orders for that card. Like people calling out of state, hey, do you have this card? And I'm like, you can get one, but that's all I can sell you. So you kind of have to, for Fab, I'm realizing when it comes to Majestics, you really got to pay attention to the generics most of all. Like, okay, we get why CNC is great, but at the same time, you should look at other Majestic generic cards that also deal with mechanics. Like, for instance, when High Seas was going to be said about gold, first thing I thought was, oh, pay up, because you deal with gold, it's generic, you have the same stats as CNC, but you cost 3 instead of 2. And I remember telling you, Will, at the time, oh, it's $1, it's going to go up. I'm thinking, you know, might go up $20. It didn't. So I bought 5 for $5 and went up to 8, which, you know, it's still a net positive, but at the same time,
I mean, it's 50% profit, dude.
Yeah. So you got 3 new heroes that deal with gold. Then you had Victor, and then you had Kasai. Oh yeah, and Olympia. So you got 6 heroes that deal with gold.
Yeah.
If the current trend happens, if every hero that doesn't really use gold LLs out the format, and then we keep slowly getting heroes that deal with gold, after a while, you're going to have a whole meta where gold is very important, and that card will shoot to the moon.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thought process on the speculation and why you chose to go up for pay up. All right, based off, you had very limited knowledge, but, you know, I guess you could say your limited knowledge and your speculation on things really did pay up, because it did go up in price, right? So
yeah, I tend to think like 5 years could this potentially be good in 5 years, and most cards are a no. But when I'm looking at like the generics, it tends to be 50-50 of like, okay, this could be good. Like, okay, for instance, obviously we got one that hits the hand. If there's a generic that comes out and that says, oh, okay, cool, if this does damage, you completely lose the armor. And I mean like a regular generic. I'm not talking about like that warrior. I'm not talking about like Shatter, where you gotta hope warriors to do good. It needs to be like, I feel like LSS should be very careful with that. They could break the game and have to have like an emergency banning if they're not careful. But at the same time, when I look at Shatter right now, I went and got my playset because it's like Noah says, every card will get their day. But what a lot of people don't realize is when it comes to types, that tends to rotate a little bit faster than a card, because you're going to have multiple heroes that are warriors. And Ellis said, and if you pay very close attention to what James White says, he eventually wants each class to have its time in the sun. So you prepare now. In the future, you don't have to worry about price hikes.
Yeah,
but that's just all still.
I do think you proved a good point. Like I always mentioned, like, you know, you really need to pay attention to developer notes or James White or Brian Gottlieb. Like all of them, they'll give contextual clues about what's coming out in the future that will spike the price. If you get ahead of it and buy it when it's low, you can actually speculate and actually make a profit or a trade value that's positive if you do it correctly, based off of what the clues are from these developers, right? I know you guys are pretty good about that too.
I mean, yeah, it's also based off of just what you haven't seen. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we haven't seen a new this, or we haven't seen a new that, or maybe you catch inklings of whatever. But I mean, you don't have to own. I mean, you should if you want to explore every class. Like you have this, like, I want to make all these decks and like test all these cards. You should own a play set of all the Majestics. Yeah. I don't. You know, like, there's no downside. Even if none of them are, like, 90% of them never get their time in the sun, there's really no downside, because if it's already at like 50 cents, 40 cents, whatever, $1, the chances of it going any lower where you're like saving a significant amount of money by waiting is just, it's just not there. So you might as well just buy the card at $1, 40 cents, 30 cents, whatever it is, hold on to the play set. You know, maybe you'll use it, maybe you won't. But even if you don't down the road, it's you know, I could trade it for this and play this because this is what I really want to play.
Yeah.
And definitely the generics. If you don't have a play set of like the generic Majestics, like, you're just missing out. They're generics. Like they're the ones you got to look at all the time. generics.
And that's not even just for Fab. That's for basically every card game that has a generic class of cards. But then here's another thing. Another reason is if I want to get something, let's say my fiance wants to get into Fab, and let's say she likes ninjas. But because I bought all the Ninja Majestics, I can build her something. She can come to Army. She can sort of keep up. Versus, oh, okay, well, I only have maybe one of this card, two of this other card. Let me try to convince her to something else. I don't have to really worry about that. And it basically allows you to help expand the community with your collection.
That's a good point. All right. So let's go on to a couple of different points that I've gathered up over the course of conversations or through Discord. Does Living Legend shake up card value? Like when something Living Legends or when does that format itself actually impact anything about the pricing of cards? Or is that something that new players or players that are trying to get more into securing funding for their hobbies, should they even worry about that? Or is it something they should just put to the side?
Okay, well, it's like a two-part answer, right?
You,
I think it depends.
You can be candid, Nova. It doesn't matter. LSS doesn't listen to us, right? They're not going ding us.
It's not. It's not that. It's not that. No, Living Legend, I think, just touches people differently. Do you know what I mean? I think that there's a big community behind it that has a lot of love for the older heroes and their playability, and maybe that's just what resonates with them in Fab. It's a little high rolly, sure, it's a little degenerate, but I think that's kind of part of the fun and that aspect. And I haven't tried it out myself, and I keep kicking myself because I really should. I think it's a fun format, but it's a hard one to answer. I definitely think Living Legends creates some value train for cards. I haven't seen a huge spike. I know Crown of Seeds,
That's good.
Had that limited time where it shot up, but it wasn't necessarily because of Living Legends. Some of the Shane stuff kind of went up a little bit. People were buying some of his weapons because he was really big in Living Legend. So you get a little bit of spillover, a little bit more kind of reinvigorated hype for some of these older heroes or these heroes that can no longer be played, but not a huge kind of glow up, at least that I've particularly noticed. Now, but I'm not necessarily looking for it. Living Legends usually isn't something I'm keeping a very big tab on. I'm a pretty big kind of CC only type of player. Blitz, I hardly even look at either.
And to go on continuing that mind frame, how about Project Blue?
Project Blue is a little different, right? Because Project Blue is a better commoner in its rights, or what it's trying to be, which I think is a more inviting format than commoner, because I think commoner still has some weird degeneracy, which is why I like the idea that they're going to ban some of the power creep that's even in their rares and commons that kind of interacts poorly, and create this very bare bones kind of IRA deck, but as a format. Hey, very limited power creep, very limited cards, explore your creativity, your options, and now you're really on those micro values of, my 5 attack that I only spent 2 resources on that had this kind of weird effect in this niche use is now going to generate that value because decks are going to be so stalemated on their play pattern, since it's a lot of common and rares. You're not going to see very big spiky turns. You're going to see very incremental value turns. And I think that is so appealing to also the higher community who gets to kind of edge out these little value plays, and then the newer players feel like they are on cloud 9 because at least their decisions feel very, I wouldn't say solved for them, but a lot more clear and very linear. My card blocks for 3, but I could also play it for 4, go again, and get a little width in this situation. I like what I see in my hand. You know what I mean? That type of dynamic, and I think it's wonderful. I think it is such a more inviting format if that's what they're going for than Blitz. And I would welcome it wholeheartedly, and I would love to play a Project Blue deck more so than show up on Data Doll and put 8 items into the arena and roll my opponent in 2 turns and say, welcome to Flesh and Blood. Because that feels awful, and it happens. Or I go Dory somebody, and I go, hey, guess what? It really doesn't matter how you block this because I'm going to come over it. And they're like, well, why did I even play? And it's like, welcome to Flesh and Blood. So I think that if this is how they're going to steer it, make Blitz kind of a high rolly, fun format that you play at higher ups and still keep it relevant, but Project Blue feels like, if it works, would be such a good entry format. I mean, beautiful format. Kind of like Crack Shuffle Play, but on a little more, I get to add my own je ne sais quoi to the deck as a newer player and like my touch than just shuffling up a pack and playing with it.
And you can play Prism too, because that was one of the things I hated about Commoner. When I got someone interested in the game, they were like, "Oh, let me play Prism," and it's like, "Oh, you can't use none of her heroes because they're rare. She doesn't have one that is common." I think whenever they release this new format, which I think will be towards the end of this year, I think the game will explode in popularity because it, like Commoner, the money aspect is not a factor. That and, you know, you have people like Noah and myself. Oh, here's a bunch of cards. Help people build 2 or 3 decks, and then they work their way up to Blitz and then CC.
Yeah.
So do you think
I
you'll
don't.
spike the price of the cards, or do you think you'll
No,
stay kind of like nice and neutral?
I think like LL, it'll keep cards from becoming like worth a penny. For instance, like like Legacy, well, it'll be like a little pillow. If if a price is crashing down, it'll cushion it, and it'll be, maybe we'll say like 50 cents to $1. But that's only if this game survives the next 5 years, and as long as LSS supports it. As long as they support it, your cards will definitely keep value when it comes to the tournament scene, because after a while, more and more people will gradually have a deck that gets pushed into LL format that they want to keep playing. Now, it's never going to replace CC. I think CC is always constantly going to dominate card prices, the same as Modern does in Magic. But we're not going to have the same issues because we do have reprints, since we don't have the reserve list issue. But then also you have a lot of people who don't want to spend a lot of money on this game because they want to play video games or do something else. But
There is nothing else. There's only Flesh and Blood. I'm just joking. So go ahead.
true, true. In a way, Crack Shuffle and Play, and I love how LSS just took this from Magic. That I really realistically think that product is not going to be a one-off. For the sole fact, like with Jumpstart, when somebody would come into my job, crack open 2 packs, shuffle it up, they can play. Oh, I like this game. It takes the deck building aspect. The same way with like Blitz decks and Armory decks, but depending on what the price is, it could be super cheap. Now, if you're spending $8 to get into a game, and we don't play 5 games, and me as the store clerk, I'm gonna let you win a couple because I want you to come back to get that money. I now just expanded the community and brought in more future money to the store, which is beneficial to us and LSS. And that's why I really think they put in Bravo. They want to still appeal to the older players, and then players who came after, like myself. Oh, okay, well, I heard about Bravo. Well, let me try this new Bravo and see. And the fanboys are going to hype up the product. I also think they're going to eventually have an issue with so many formats, but that's just going to make me and Noah's job a little bit harder on which cards we should speculate on. It's just going to put a little bit more random attention to it.
Well, I do think that Commoner might go to the wayside if Project Blue kicks off, right? So that,
I mean, yeah,
ahead,
it should though. I was gonna say it should though. Project Blue is, I think, gonna just be a more refined Commoner, which Commoner was kind of just a hey, you can do it format. Project Blue should be a supported format, and I think if it was choosing between Commoner and Project Blue, you just choose Project Blue because I think it will have a better experience for the newer player and the natural lineup progression. So like maybe welcome deck Ira to Crack Shuffle Play to something like Project Blue and then into CC. kind of if you wanted to do a natural progression to expand the horizon and the card pool in a way that doesn't overwhelm them with the majestic, and rarity and rares and legendaries and the insane kind of price yet. And they can kind of slowly see if they like the bare bones skeleton of the game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I kind of think, I low-key think it's their answer to the fan-made Clash format. They're kind of like, okay, they'll take legendaries out a little bit, but we're going to take majestics out too, just to see how y'all feel about it. Because realistically, I don't see them wanting to support a format that's currently fan-made right now. I think eventually they will, but realistically, legendaries help sell cases. So,
well, I mean, I think the idea is Project Blue. It's not fan made like that. It's very, very kind of in like the grassroots right now. But this is something that LSS is kind of like speculating about themselves. This, like, the devs are the ones that are putting out this kind of idea, which I think it's they understand that Commoner is a good idea, but it also has its flaws, and I think that they noticed that Blitz isn't the greatest entry level format. This is LSS kind of realizing, hey,
Blitz
maybe, because you've got two echelons of players, like, playing Blitz. The I know how to high roll you, and the I have no idea what I'm doing. But you're trying to sell them a Blitz deck to get into the game. You know what I mean? If everybody just used Blitz decks, sure, it'd be the most, it'd be semi fair, I guess. But then you have the whole Blitz deck strength. So
yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's talk about the actual practical application. Now, we talked about a whole bunch of concepts, but let's talk about like how new players would wheel and deal at the local level, or even be able to pit out to the Facebook group or the Discord group, Purple Discord. With that being said, like, there's so much information we already covered so far, but how do you guys actually price singles?
I just put them up for whatever arbitrary value I want. I mean, again, it's hard.
I love it, Noah. I love that.
I'm dead serious.
I get it.
This goes back to that same thing. I can't wake up to 46 orders. So most of the time when my prices are up on TCG Player, it's a placeholder. I want to know how many of X, Y, and Z I have across my binders or whatever. And it's just a way to know that I own, 10 copies of this or some crazy thing. And I leave them up there. And I don't mess around with it, and I'll wheel and deal locally, whatever. But in terms of like pricing singles, I mean, straight up, I just go buy TCG Player usually. I mean, whatever the market price is, we call it market price. So if you're trying to get a little bit of a wheel and deal, usually you work with the first Facebook Marketplace and Purple Discord. People say, hey, 85 TCG low, 80 TCG low, something of that nature. And the reason they're giving you a little bit off is because they're not going to be hit by a 13% fee from TCG Player or from any other online selling platform, right? And so, you'll do whatever you want, and you'll get your money through PayPal, Cash App, whatever it may be, local. And so there's two kind of ways to price it. But then there's times where I price singles where I look at a card and I go, again, like, I don't have any interest in putting up the copies at $1 and selling them slowly at $1. Like, the time versus the net resources, and so I'll just stick them up there until, like, whenever, until they're like 4 or 5, whatever. Something that just is a little easier to move in terms of supply cost and things like that. But again, everything's available locally for whatever the market price is. I go strictly by TCG. I try and do 75, 80 in some rare cases. And unlike most communities, Pokemon actually does this quite frequently, even among its like really respected traders, things like that. They trade at like 75 and 80 value, like they actually trade with a benefit. And I rarely do it. I usually just try and trade straight across, like 1-to-1, because I'm also doing the same thing where if I'm trading from you, I'm speculating on realized value of a card, and I might actually edge out like $3 or $4 if the card moves in the next month or two. You know what I mean? So whatever, I'm not looking for it. So, but that's kind of how I go about it. My prices are arbitrary. Like, literally, I'll look at a card, the market price is $5, and I'll go $50, and it's just like, is it ever going to sell? Probably not. But it's not the point. I'm not trying to sell it. I don't want 40 orders, okay? I want a real steady order stream. If it's priced to sell, it's priced to sell.
Yeah. And,
I price things to sell,
and
and I
Sinclair,
do give
how?
deals.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you, anyone who's trading with these two dealers, they always give the fairest price, right? So really, reach out to them. They will work with you. But Sinclair, how do you price singles?
So before I get how I price it, I was I was trained by my mentor. Don't sit there and just try to take all their money. Just get a little bit of their money each time. They'll just keep coming back. For like bulk, I won't price anything less than 10 cents. After that, it's not worth it. The bare minimum that I'm willing to take is if I break even. Okay, I broke even, but this person got their cards and they'll eventually be a repeat customer worth something a little more expensive. Um, I tend to mostly go by TCG player, but sometimes if I have a card that's been sitting there and I know it's overpriced, and we'll say Wreck Havoc is going up for like $10, right? Which it's not worth $10, everyone. And I'm like, okay, it's been sitting at $10 for 6 months. It's not worth $10. There's no sales. I'm gonna price it at $7. Then if it sells at $7, okay, that's the current market value, just so I can sit there and move it, because I don't want a lot of my money just sitting on the shelf. Sometimes you got to just lower the price to get some more liquidity, so you can purchase new cards or pay for like plane tickets or whatever that you're trying to do. But then I always ask myself, if I was the buyer, what do I kind of wish this price would be, and not like some fantasy like free. Like, okay, if this card's $7, I can buy three for 21. That's what I tend to do. If I'm feeling like super generous, usually it's probably $5. It's just if I have a bunch of them. I'm not trying to, I'm trying to help grow the game. That's why I'm mostly focused on bulk right now. But realistically, I tend to use these formulas I developed for like legendaries and majestics and everything. But that's for another video because that'll take too long.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, have you guys noticed trends during set launches or band announcements? Like, I know could potentially be two separate questions, right? So, let's say a new set launches, right, versus a band announcement, right? Do you guys ever adjust your price or try to figure out like what's going on while this is happening, or do you let the price settle, or do you let the announcement happen first before you kind of weigh in, or how's that work?
I'm late to every single one of them. I think there's only a couple I've ever, like, if I haven't already told you guys 3 weeks in advance, and I'm late to it. Let's just be
Mm,
real, because like I'm constantly thinking about things, but I am like as surprised as everybody else. I will go on TCG Player, and sometimes this is how I know, because I arbitrarily price my singles and they've sold, and that's when I know something wild has happened. That's also kind of like a reason I do it, because I'm just like, wait a minute, if that sold, what just happened? Like,
yeah.
why did this go up? And so I'll go and do the research, and so retroactively, sure, but usually I try and stay way ahead of it, or you kind of miss the boat, because Fab works so quickly. And if you want to say like a trend, especially with new sets, whatever class is being talked about, hinted at, confirmed, speculated, leaked, whatever you want to say. Whenever some kind of data has happened, just go check the class cards and start looking at them climb. Some of them are going to be drastic, but there are what I like to call the kind of surges, the kind of peak sort of buy phases that happen. One of them is initially at any hint or whisper. So like second Ranger gets announced, right? You just start seeing New Horizon through the roof, right? Because it's like this. So the second somebody, it's like a snap reaction. Fab has tons of it. That's one of the biggest surges you're going to see in like patterns, is there's always a snap surge right at the beginning, right at the announcement. Banlist is a little different, because usually it's the opposite. You'll see like a dumping of cards, so like Germinate, things of that nature.
Did
But
you
also,
predict Germinate, by the way? I wasn't sure.
no, I Germinate was, so when we were talking about the bans and things like that, I don't think anybody mentioned Germinate. I don't think we realized, like, the card's good and it is part of the win con, but our reason for banning Germinate wouldn't have been the reason that Germinate was banned, which was also extremely fair. That there was a card that could recur Germinate, and that's a huge problem. Which is, like, what's going on, LSS? Why would you do that anyway? But
tier format, that's what they were doing.
But all that aside, I did not speculate a Germinate ban. But this is a good time to buy it. Germinate's not the problem. I think it's the card interaction in Florian. So once again, Germinate will probably have its time back in the sun. It's a good time to get the extended arts, things like that. They will slowly, some people won't post them because they'll feel like, hey, there's no point, it's banned. Like I don't necessarily have any interest in trying to get rid of this card right now. I'll just wait. Like that's kind of how Fab works. Not everybody is just rushing out to dump their cards as soon as okay, whatever. People hold on to things. People move, like, oh, whatever, I'll keep them. But you should see price lowerings from ban lists, and probably a little surge just from people switching to decks if a deck got hit like really big. But I think that the new set patterns are just way more stark. Just whatever class, look at core cards, they instantly start climbing, and there's always some kind of initial snap buy on the very high value equipment and things like that. Case in point, Crown of Dominion, New Horizon, and Trench, even back when Ranger was being hinted at all, right? Like, so we see this. Is Trench going to get used? Probably not, but it still had a snap surge, didn't it?
I remember you mentioned that, yeah.
Someone, I forget who, somebody joked about Germinate getting banned. You know what? Speaking of Trench, and Will, you'll remember this. When it was $15, I'm like, something keeps telling me, go ahead and just get two, one to keep, one to resell, and then as soon as they mention Pirates, that mug shot up to $50, and I was so angry with myself. I'm just like,
and that's just off the word pirate. You know what I mean? Like that's literally off the word pirate, and the fact that that's the Trench and it says Sunken Treasure. Yeah. Like maybe people knew it was a Ranger, right? But like that's. Dude, Marvel Rock is the best example. He literally just said rock. James White said the word rock, like a rock, and then it went through the moon.
Yeah.
Everybody don't always listen to what he says because, like, okay, think about how many times he said Droma is going to come back, and then I went.
She is.
But I went and looked at all the dusts, and I'm like, why y'all $1? I said, you know what? Let me just buy playsets.
That's because they alluded that she's not coming back for a good minute. There's probably a design flaw with Dromai in some way that they need to make the dust less slow, because the dust seemed just really slow, but without making it as broken as it was before. Because Dromai was a massive problem before. Like no deck with allies and that much of board sustainability should have that much width and still have that much defensive prowess. She was a really good deck.
So I'll tell a personal story here with New Horizon. I bought actually 2 copies of this based off Noah's Market Minute in the Siblings and Cardboard podcast. And I bought them at $65, maybe $70 per New Horizon. And let me tell you, this shot up to 200, like, was it 180 or $200?
It was like at its highest, I think it was like a 180, 190 card for a very brief time, and it kind of went back down, and it stabilized around 150-ish, 160-ish.
Which is what I traded it for, so I really got $70 worth of value. And I got $70 worth of value off New Horizon alone based off speculation. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. So it kind of goes to, speculation on new sets versus any kind of singles that, they might think would have more value. Like, I think we all knew the worst kept secret in the new set High Seas was Codex Frailty would get reprinted, right? Does that mean you sell your old codexes and rebuy, or does that mean you, like, what? Like, so we need to know that, so go ahead.
Okay, so if I was smart, right, if I actually cared enough about, like, the money aspect of it, which sometimes I get like the stark realization, I'll be sitting here vaping and looking at the cards, and I'll be like, why didn't I just sell the damn Codex of Frailties when they were like, but I was playing Azalea, and I like my I like my foil Codex of Frailties and things like that, and I don't really want to sell them, and I don't care, I got them back when they were $40 or something for the foils, so I've had them for so long. So as far as I'm concerned, okay, I missed the boat at 150, but like, did I really need to gouge like 110, 100, 80, 90? It's all, you know what I'm saying? It's all value. You know what I mean? In the long run. So if you wanted to be smart, as soon as you have this idea Codex is going to get reprinted, you sell them. You dump your foil Codex of Frailties, your common Codex of Frailties, and if you actually want to generate value and carry on something and like put the money elsewhere into new cards, then you buy the new Codex of Frailties when they get low, and they're going to continue to be lower, you know. But like that's what you do if you want to kind of edge that full value out and carry it over, and maybe what I should have done, but I didn't do it. But like that would be my play. Is I would have dumped the old ones and just waited and bought the new ones.
Yeah. Sinclair, any thoughts on that?
I agree with everything he said. I just feel like I don't really, unless you really like the art of the new one, I would personally just keep the current codexes that I got, because eventually they're going to have to reprint this yet again. It might be a few years from now, but doing what Noah said, you really got to know what you're doing, because then if you get rid of your $300 playset and all of a sudden you want to get it again, you might as well just kept it.
Yeah. It depends on how long you wait, right? Because I think in reality you could sell the old codexes, you could sell them right now and use the newer versions, and then wait, and you might be able to get your old codexes a little lower once, like, you know, people are selling a little bit more. Or the flip side of that is, and you know, something we have to consider, that's Outsiders. Outsiders I don't think is in print anymore, if I'm not mistaken. And Outsiders is hard to find. Outsiders has like its own issues in Belgium and all sorts of things, but like that set's hard to find. That set might be worth more, or you know, on par with Dynasty soon in terms of its scarcity. Does that make the old codex worth more in the long run? I don't know. You know what I mean? It really just depends. How do you value it? If you value playability, who cares? Yeah. If you value the collectorship of it, it depends on what art you like the most. Now, I will say the Marvel Codex of Frailties, you just hold on to those.
Oh yeah. Don't get rid
of the Marvel Codex of Frailties are a long-term sell for a car investment. No, but they are a long-term investment.
The
Marvel Codex. You don't grade them. You put them in the little $2 hard case.
Yeah. I mean, the old Marvel Codex is a frailty, could pay for your medical bills, right? So,
well, like for me personally, if I would have pulled the new codexes and, you know, let's say they're 20% higher than the old ones, I'm going to sell it and get two of the older ones. You know, I'll just see this. I'm discounting the second one. Yeah. A lot of people should think about doing that too. Unless, you know, you really want to place it of the new ones. But if you're just trying to get 3 codexes for the least amount of value, you know, sell the new one while it's at its peak and then get some of the older ones.
Yeah. So I guess when we're talking about all this, we'll bring it back to the point. So how do you compare sealed product versus singles as investments? Do you guys buy boxes or cases, or do you buy singles? Like, what do you do here to kind of get ahead?
I mean, if you want to really get ahead, if the idea is not arbitrary market manipulation, because like that's the most, I guess, like true scummy scalping way. I mean, like I'm not going to buy every copy of Dread Threads to create an artificial vacuum. You know what I mean? And there's people that will do that. But if you want to wheel and deal in a very low risk environment, you do speculation based off of what you haven't seen. So right now I would do Guardian, and because of the Guardian set, and Brute. And I would kind of try and, you know, figure out maybe I want to play a Brute and like, you know, speculate on some cards, have a play set. If I like the, you know, the class, okay, I'm rolling hot when it comes out. If I don't, I get to dump it for a value at its peak and maybe move into something else that I want to play. And I've generated some kind of internal value without spending a lot of money. Me personally, I love gambling and I like opening cards, but more so just for the aspect of opening cards. I don't know what it is about it. It's the idea. I mean, I like surprises, and I can't logic what's in the pack. Do you know what I mean? Like, It's random. No matter what I think I'm going to see in there, it could be anything. And so I really like that aspect of it. And so I open up all my product. I don't sell the sealed Dynasty I have. Like, I have slowly been opening my Dynasty and like Outsiders and things like, because it's just fun. Like I'm not ever gonna like sit on it and sell it like for $1 million sealed. It's just not what I do. I'd rather get the singles, and most of the time I'm gonna lose money opening the boxes. Majority of these sets, and it really just depends what set, you're taking a risk opening the boxes. Now, some are going to say for Hunted and High Seas, it wasn't that big of a risk. And in some cases, it's not. And in High Seas, I think it's still yet to be seen, because I'd like to say there's more product out than there was of Hunted. Just more people got that product is the problem, because more stores decided to jump in on it. Some for good reasons, some for bad reasons. And I talked about this in my podcast kind of solo thing I did, where you know, this was a very all eyes on this type of set, and so we already knew that this was going to be a Hunted 2.0. We just didn't realize it was going to be because a bunch of other stores were going to suddenly go, oh, I want to, you know, hold fab, but not most, you know, most of them probably aren't doing it for a kosher reason, and they're just jumping on the price hike, which is kind of bad. I mean, like, it has a tough feel, but how is LSS supposed to know the difference between somebody trying to start up and then not? So it's a tough predicament. But I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the lower value singles, because people it just released today, and things have to be shipped, so we just need time. I think you're going to see that opening High Seas is a high risk, high reward for the gamble in the treasure packs and things like that, the chases. But the lower I'm invested in the game, or the budget level, or the competitive player, should just be looking at singles for this set, which kind of sucks because people want to kind of feel their own little treasure trail. You're just going to have to kind of wait for the price, people to sell their hoard of like sealed product that they bought to flip, you know, and have them constantly undercut each other, as well as the single prices drop. So it is less likely that they will open it for a fast profit, and then people will sell the sealed for lower and lower. That's what we're hoping, and then obviously a reprint at some point. But that's kind of my grand answer to that.
Yeah, I say wait for the reprint of the Hunted and the High Seas, realistically.
Yeah.
For me, I don't advise anybody to really buy booster packs. I'd say, you know, save up your money and just buy a box if that's what you're really going to do. For me, I'm working my way up to every time a new set comes out, I'm just going to buy 1 to 2 cases, pull everything that I want to make my play set, and then just sell everything else that I don't need and use that money for the next set. When it comes to holding stuff for a really long time, I might have like a box of, I'll use Dynasty. Let's say I buy 3 cases of Dynasty, and I pull everything I need from those 3 cases, but I got 1 box open. I'll hold that box for a long time, and, you know, for like a special tournament or something, or, you know, just wait for a bigger collector to come and have that mystique of, oh yeah, I got something that's really old that nobody have anymore, and then you can just resell it. You know, where I'm from is called squirreling something away, but you just kind of do that for the fun aspect. You don't really try to hope and pray 1 box goes up to $1,000, because realistically, you're gonna wait like 2 decades for that to actually happen.
Yeah.
And it's not, even then, it's just gonna make good content for people to open up a booster. Case in point, for those who play Magic, Ice Age boxes.
Yeah, that set was so bad when it first came out too.
True. No, Ice Age. At my old job, Ice Age, it was rumored that Corner had Ice Age boxes.
Yeah.
And at the time, he only had packs. So I went to clean up another part of the store, and then I found a big tub, and it was like 12 boxes. Like, you know, you watch a cartoon and the dust flies everywhere. That literally happened to me. I'm like, what is this? I'm coughing, and it's 12 boxes of Ice Age, and we sold them for like $600 a piece. But that set came out 20 years ago. So thinking, oh, I'm gonna sit there and wait, you might as well just go buy stock in the S&P 500 and wait 20 years. You'll make more money, I can guarantee you.
Yeah, dude. When you said Ice Age came out 20 years ago, you made me feel old. I'm just saying that, right?
I feel younger because I don't know what Ice Age is. So
okay, yeah.
Young now? No, I'm 31.
31? Okay. Yeah, I got you beat by food. Yeah.
I was around for Ice Age. I was actually around for Revised, which is Magic the Gathering. But
Ooh, you're a dinosaur.
I
You're
am,
young.
and
I
I feel
started
old.
playing it when 8th edition came out. It was
Yeah,
2000.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. So, one of our podcast sections is covering myths and misconceptions. So, I'm going to say a statement, and you'll tell me if it's yay, nay, or total bullshit. So, are you guys ready for
Is it
this?
nay and total bullshit the same thing?
Well, nay could be with stipulations.
Okay, okay.
Right. So it could
Like
be.
it's not necessarily true, but not true, and then the other one is okay. All right, all right, all right.
Making something up.
Sure,
Wait,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Well, way to call me out on my own podcast, Noah.
Well, look, I'm just trying to
Oh,
figure.
No, no, I
I'm
get it. I
trying
get
to
it.
figure out.
All right,
This is
so
a.
all right, so yay, nay, and sometimes it could be totally. What the heck was this comment thinking about? How's that? All right.
Sure, sure. Let's go for it. Rapid 'em.
Cold foils always go up.
Nay.
Big thing.
We need context behind it, but nay.
Okay.
I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. So
But
Sinclair, you
there's a
think
reason.
cold foils always go up, and Noah, you said not necessarily. So this is the part where we talk about. So let's say a new player or a person that's not relatively new into Flesh and Blood. They're like, oh, he's got a cold foil. I'm going to trade for it because I speculate that the value will go up. Is that would you if he said, "Hey Noah, hey Sinclair, is this a good trade?" Would you say, "Yeah, go for it"?
What cold foil? Cold foil commons, unless they're actually having any playability, no. There's zero chance they go up. A cold foil Seeker's gloves, it's probably a bad example because it's the glove slot. A cold foil, God, I don't know. The grandstand boots or whatever from heavy hitters is never going up. Like, it's just never going to go up. Okay, unless some wild, crazy thing happens or project, that's what I said. It's hard. But naturally, no. Also, New Horizons is a really good example. It's probably one of the only ones, though, where the cold foil is usually worth less or right on par with the rainbow foil just because of the way that tails is flipped. It has more first edition than non-first edition.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I say that, too, is because Fab is playability first, collector second, and playability is rainbow foil for the most part. So it's just not always true that because you have the cold foil, it's necessarily going to go up. Although, if the cold foil is the max rarity, then you have that chance of the unrealized value. So that's the kind of yes and no on that.
Sinclair, you got any counterpoints, or since you guys kind of had opposite viewpoints, do you have anything you want to say?
I would say if you're thinking short term, no, it's not going to go. Now, if you're thinking like long term, like 10 plus years, I realize that this type of foiling has its own niche collectors, and they will buy everything in that foiling, no matter how damaged they are. If it's hard to find, even if it's a common, not useful in the meta, but because I need these boots to complete my collection, somebody will buy it. Now, the amount that it goes up is so minuscule, it might go up a penny a year at best, but it's not really like, are you really going to want to track that over 10 years? Oh, you went up 10 cents? No. But when it comes to like the first edition ones, when I just went on TCG Player, let me just collect these cold foils because my channel's original name was Ultimate Rare because it's my favorite rarity. I'm one of these collectors. And I'm like, why is this $300? This card is not good. Okay, but you got commons now and they're $1, and these cards are only 3 years old. Well, let me just go ahead and get 1 or 2 and see. It's just for collectors, it'll go up. But if you're a player, I'm with Noah. You're gonna go for the rainbow foil because it looks just as good and it's readable. Because there are some cold foils, Great Library, that is so shiny and so hard to read. I would never play it. It would just sit into all our things.
They're inextricably tied together, though. Like the cold foils going up is still dependent on the card being playable. Let's make that clear. Yeah. I think there's a very small collector aspect that goes with cold foils, but Courage of Bladehold has consistently gone down. Cold foil. One, there's a gold foil in existence, so it's not max rarity. 2, it's just not the used chess piece right now. So Will it go up? You know what I mean? Like, that's why I said cold foils will always go up. Who knows? What if courage just completely stays phased out to grains of blood spill and it never gets another like kind of time in its sun unless like limited Bolton play? But by then, if the original price of courage or the ceiling was like $750 and it gets back to $400, did it really go up? You know what I mean? Like, it depends on where you came in at. So
Yeah.
that's why I said it's a very hard question to just say yes or no.
Yeah.
Because Fab is just player driven. It's playability, data, meta driven, like most card games, and collector completely second. It's like the flip of Pokemon.
I will say, I
Oh yeah,
speculated when the Hunter
Pokemon's
first.
the only. Pokemon's like blue chip. It's buy and hold. It'll go up. It's more collector than player friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say when Hunter first came out, I speculated on the cold foil going up, and that was for the boob tax alone. Leapfrog slime skin. I thought that with commoner or other formats that this would actually increase in value in cold foil. So I actually traded out these cards like a whole playset of cold foil because I thought, hey, maybe there'd be some value. Now maybe I was slightly biased in that trade, but I certainly made it. So, and I'm not
I
saying
can see why you're biased.
Hey,
this is the Kelpie choke joke all over again. I can see why you're biased.
Look, I was hope at an hour or some odd minutes that my wife does not watch this podcast because that card was very in cold foil print, like it looks very good. Right, that's all I'm saying. So
well, tell her it's cosplay time.
I can. So
I know, right?
All right, so here to mix the answers, but cold foil doesn't necessarily always go up. It just depends on playability. That's the general consensus. Is that correct?
I mean, I'm
just like cold foil legendary. It'll retain value somewhat. It might be low because I don't think it's legendary.
It just Fab's not a buy and wait, and it'll eventually go because it just has to be played. You know what I mean? Where nobody's collecting it like every copy of Reshiram. You know what I mean? Nobody wants Dietic Carapace if Dietic Carapace isn't being played. Like it's better traded and used for a card that can be played right now.
All right.
You know.
So another myth: only whales make money flipping cards. True? False.
But I think that's completely false. It just depends. Okay. Whales can make more money because they literally have more liquid assets, right? If we're talking about the ability to buy whatever you want, you're always going to have, like, money makes money. I mean, it's one of the first things anybody will ever tell you. You can literally just set it in a CD, interest account, whatever it may be. Money can generate money. So, sure. And in a highest, like, percentage margin aspect, the person that literally has, infinite or higher liquidity of assets is going to make more money because they can take the risk. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can't make some kind of money as a low-risk singles buyer buying 5 copies of Frightmare at 30 cents, and eventually if they you know what I mean? Like, it just depends on how quick you want to do it and how short-term and long-term. I will say, though, that it's not necessarily something that you should do for, like, a real, you know what I mean? Like, money. LGSs make money in twofold off of like running events and then the single side of it if they're selling singles. And then obviously there's self-sustaining single stores like, Fluke and Box and Righteous Gaming and things like that are more on that. Maybe not the full LGS front, although I'm not entirely sure if either one of them is an actual LGS. But I'm sure there are sellers out there that are, they're not attached to an LGS. They're just mainly singles. It's probably slim. I mean, that you don't get crazy margins from really quick like deals unless you're buying high price cards and getting like a 60-50% like gold foil type cards and then making like a few $100s on like a quick flip or something like that. Sure, but like not every transaction is going to go that well, and I just think buying at 50-60 is kind of diabolical. But like I know everybody kind of has their range, so. But no, I anybody can do it. I think in a way, some people kind of frown upon it because it's like, well, why are you trying to make a business out of it? And it's like, it's not necessarily a business. It's more so kind of like passive income in a sense. Like if I hold 3 copies of Frightmare and they go up, I mean, like why am I at fault for this?
Yeah.
Now, 36 copies of 5-pox is a little aggressive, but like the card's 10 cents or something like that. So I'm just hedging my bets.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to use your hobby to fund your hobby, right? So that's
Well, yeah, I
pretty much
mean,
what
like
you're doing. So
yeah, we're moving value that isn't realized yet, and we're waiting for it to be realized to then move it to something else. Like, and anybody can do it. It's just peaks and valleys with it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to be a whale to do this. You just need to jump in at the right time and have patience.
Yeah.
It is not an tomorrow thing. You're not going to realize any of the value till way later for majority of these things that you'd be doing. Unless you're, like I said, you've got big money and you're just buying people's collections at like 55, 60%, and you're instantly able to flip the cards at 80, and you're just like, this is free real estate. Well, yeah, duh. But, like, you don't need to do that. So no. No is my answer.
Yeah.
I say it's
Go ahead.
complete BS. Oh, I say it's complete BS because I've seen hundreds of people, they'll buy one pack, pull a card that's 100 up to 1,000. Oh, let me trade this into the store, sell it to this person for 70%. They currently made money and now they're completely in the hobby. I personally grew my TCG store from just $300 over the past 5 years and made a good bit of money. Nothing that's gonna, let me retire early, but you don't have to come in with like 10, 20,000 just to make a little bit of money. Like realistically, I tell anybody, if you're going to start flipping cards, the most realistic thing you can do is aim to at least just break even. So if your hobby's paying for itself, you can keep doing your hobby. Don't do like some people. I'm going to take out 10,000. I've seen this. Take out $10,000 out their 401k, open up a store, and then in 2 months they can't pay them bills. All of a sudden, their wife is angry at them, and they're coming to me, and I'm just like, "Yeah, let me just get the ball. I'm not about to spend like $6,000 on the card right now. I got diapers to buy."
Yeah. I will say I was accused of being a whale by one of our local players, Jose. Right? He was like, "Dude, you always have all the cards." I was like, "I really don't spend a lot of money on this hobby. I trade very well, and I get really, really, really lucky." Right? Like,
Yeah.
and I can't help but say I listen to, not blowing smoke up your asses, but I listen to Noah, I listen to Sinclair, and I make really informed decisions. And I can't help but I make profit or trade profit on some of the cards I speculate on. And sometimes, even before the whole, hey, it's a generic card, you should probably purchase it if it's relatively high value with the 3 block. I was like, well, that's a good card regardless of what anyone else thinks. And most, sometimes your locals will say, oh, that card sucks. Right? And I'll
That's right.
say, I don't think it sucks. I think it has potential, just not yet. Right? And I think
Poison the well, baby.
dude, I was just about to say poison the well, or even like poison the well. You were on that for like probably 6 months before it actually tanked, or sorry, before it skyrocketed up, right?
Nobody should have been surprised by that. Read the card. It explains the
Oh
card.
yeah.
If a card literally gets created that says something about reversing life gain, your first instinct should be, oh no, this is about to print some really dumb life gain things down the road. This is hey, we're getting you ready for this when it comes. And I'm like, this is a blue card? I was like, and it's generic? Oh, just give me all the copies. I want them all. I want to poison every well. Because like that's what you should be thinking of. You don't look at a card and evaluate the now. You have to evaluate the later, and you will make money and be able to, like Will said, kind of fund yourself in the long term. Will's a very frugal player, by the way. Super frugal.
Oh yeah.
I try and get him to buy things all the time. We do trades more so ever than we do money, and I love trading. I think it's actually one of my favorite things in this hobby. I'm half Middle Eastern on my father's side, but don't let that, that's kind of wild. Dude, I love trading. Like, I'm not going to lie, there's a card game called Bonanza, and all you do is trade beans with each other, and I think it's probably the most fun game I've ever played. The idea of trading one-to-one is just so fun to me. People get what they want, and you get something that you're happy. Like it's the most amazing feeling ever.
Yeah.
Some even more than like opening a pack of cards. So Will's a very good trader, and you should trade in this hobby both ways. Trade your value down for cards that may go up. Trade your value at its peak for other cards at their peak. Like you have to wheel and deal that way.
Yeah. And I think actually Noah, we did a trade recently with I wanted a Marvel Olympia he had.
That's
Right.
correct.
And I had
Tell him about that trade you shafted me.
I'm
joking.
I didn't shaft you on it. I just had Dragon Scale. I don't even remember what they called, dude. I called
Dragon
them.
Scale Flight Pass.
Yeah, I called them D Jordans. Right.
Go ahead, tell them about it.
Well, so this card was worth a lot of money at one time. I can't remember.
$80-something, $90-something at the time that we traded. Yes.
Yeah, and Olympia was definitely worth like $70. But
67, 60, yeah.
But I really wanted Olympia because, are you not entertained? I mean, the guy just exudes just a gladiatorial, like, pizzazz, right? So I was like, I was like, hey, I got D Jordans, and you have Olympia. Can I trade you? And at the time, D Jordan was actually valued higher than Olympia was. Olympia was valued at like $20 lower. Now, Noah came back to me and said, hey, I wanted to pitch an idea to you. It's not favorable to you, but I want you to hear me out. And he said, at base value, Marvel of any character will be worth higher in the long term than any kind of legendary equipment that you could like trade me, like D Jordans.
1,000%.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? That makes sense, Noah. I'll trade you. And this is one of those examples where I actually got a value over Noah. And Noah did give me a little benefit here. All right, but I can't remember. Like, Noah, do you want to cover the rest of the story real quick? Because I know you remember it very well. So,
I mean, we traded 1-to-1. So you wanted Marvel Olympia. I wanted the Dragon Scaler Flight Pass. They were 80 at the time. And, had you had them on you, and maybe I could have, put them up there really quick. But like that was my idea. But at the same time, the reasoning behind the trade is if I want Olympia again, I can just get it. It's still very low, and I could just replace the card. 2, I get to help somebody who wants the card and wants to play it. So like I'm always on that train more than anything else. And 3, even if I do the trade, and I mean it has happened, Dragon Scale Flight Path goes down. Who's to say it doesn't have a glow up, and eventually I can at least get it back to the Olympia price and still break even. So for me, it is such a low risk trade that I don't mind. I don't have Dragon Scaler Flight Pass, so I get to get something I don't have. I get to give something in return that I have that I'm not using. That is a collector kind of aspect. But like I said, if I want it, I just get it back. Like I have that kind of luxury to do that. So for me, it's like a no-brainer, and I'm happy to do trades like this. But that's if you guys want to like get into my head, like that's how I evaluate things. Like any Marvel hero will eventually be worth something a little bit more than it currently is or falls to if it has some kind of playability or hype behind it. You're not necessarily scalping it. You're just sitting on it until it has a better realized value that's more in line with something that you want to sell the card for. And I don't know about most people, but I don't feel like selling Marvel Olympia for $70 just feels like it feels low. It feels like a slap in the face to the card itself. But like trading and things like that's a fun aspect of it, and like I said, I'm not using it. So,
but you did say when we traded, like, hey, like there's only upside for you in the future. Like you said,
100%.
You said
I gave you the upside.
Yeah, exactly. You said right now, if you give me the D Jordans, right, I can sell them right now and probably make a little bit more money than what I'm trading Olympia to you for. Yep. But if you hold it, Olympia will always be worth more in the future. Right, absolutely. And you absolutely 100,000% called that, right? So, and I know Sinclair, me and you do trade sometimes, and we do the same thing where the value of cards in the future, right, versus like the monetary value now, and you kind of play out like, is it worth trading you now, or is it worth trading you in the future, right? And you kind of always constantly weigh that too.
For me, like when it comes to Marvels, since I tend to prefer Blitz over CC, I'll look at, okay, KO is $25. If Blitz season comes out and he's the top deck, it's gonna go up. Let me just go ahead and get it for 25 and just sit on it. But I also am slightly a collector, so I never get rid of any of my marbles. And it's not even just to resell them, it's just because I like borderless cards like that. But if I ever needed to get a lot of cash quickly, I know, okay, let me just sell a couple marbles and do what I need to do. But when it comes to trading, I always tell everybody, get what you need so you can play the deck that you want to. And that if that means if it's mismatched or whatever, just go along with it and then try to, match your artwork or whatever. Don't always think about trying to make money on somebody. I've seen Noah make trades against himself to bring somebody in the community, and then someone goes, well, let me see if Noah needs this first. I'm going to go to them, because he befriends them. He's not a greedy goblin like some other people I know, like myself. I have to tone it down.
You ain't no
I'm
gritty
not even
goblin.
kidding.
I don't want to hear that from you,
I'm
Sinclair.
not a greedy goblin.
Yeah.
So it's just, but realistically, if you're thinking long term, buying marbles when they hit like 25 would net you a good percentage. I don't know if any marble is going to go up, but it's like what Noah said, it's playable. It has to be usable. If it's like let's say it's a Marvel crack bauble, that's not really going to go up past maybe like $2 to $3.
Yeah.
But if it's Marvel flame scale furnace, that's a misprint. Oh yeah, something like that is definitely going to go up because there's going to be somebody that wants it and it's a playable card. It just realistically, all this is speculation. It just depends. But you realistically, you have to make educated decisions. Because if you don't stop and think about what you're doing, you're just buying any and everything. You're always going to burn yourself, and that's with any TCG.
Yeah.
Because I don't see no one just going and just trying to buy full collections just to do it. It's like he said, okay, it's time versus money. I want to make a certain amount of money, but I'm only going to invest this amount of time because this is my more valuable resource. But I like having money. That's how Noah thinks, and that's how, like, when he talks, I stop talking to see what he's thinking, because realistically, what a lot of people do, they start to feel and smell themselves, and they think they're right on everything. I think I'm right maybe 20% of the time, and I think that's a little high. But at the same time, the amount of information that keeps coming out, there's always constant variable changes. So you just have to really be cautious when it comes to spending your money and doing this.
And I do think we do pretty good about that. And I say that for any people watching this podcast. Talk to your local players, especially the ones that will and deal a lot, the ones that go on TCG Player, the ones that are more focused on the economics of Flesh and Blood. Because, you really do get some gems from the individuals that are willing and dealing, that pay attention to, their own market minute, or what's the high selling Flesh and Blood card on TCG Player's hot list. So you do well to listen to these players and they actually have that discourse because it's so important, right?
Oh yeah, you kept me from buying so many stuff at a high price, and then this tank. You're like, no man, I'm telling you, he's gonna tank. And realistically, I'm like, okay, well, he's been doing this a little bit longer than me. Let me sit and wait. Like, honestly, I didn't really start wheeling and dealing in Flesh and Blood until I've been playing the game for 6 months. I just paid attention to what Noah was saying and doing and learning the market. So for those who are watching, if you are a big time seller in Magic, you get a Pokemon or whatever, don't come into Fab thinking, oh, it's just like this game, because every single trading card game is its own market. Different reasons why cards go up. The only thing that I would say that is universal is scarcity, high rarity, and if like the and playability. If a card has all three of those, you tend to kind of make some money off of it, but not necessarily.
Yeah. And so, as we're kind of ending to this was a long podcast, but a lot of great information for those people that don't really wheel and deal on trade. But remember, TCG Player is a great for indication of price. Now, as they were saying earlier, you want to knock it down by 10-15% to 10 to 15% to kind of get like more of a fair trade value. But you use Facebook Marketplace or use Facebook, the trade forums, and use this purple Discord to actually kind of start trading. And you really want to track the meta. You want to trade with intention, right? That's how you get ahead. You don't have to be well. You don't have to drop $1,000 to really, make profit in flesh and blood. Like I think all three of us are good indications of this, where we just trade smart, and we're not trading anything that's like trying to get any individual to like feel bad. We're trading what they want, and we just happen to get the upside in the eventual long run. And which goes to the point, and don't chase profit. Trade for your goals that covers deck building, collection value, or just for fun, right? Do you guys have anything else you want to say or state before we kind of wrap this up?
I'll say if a trade that you really want to happen doesn't happen, don't get emotional about it. Sometimes you just don't have what that person wants, or it just might be a bad time for them. If they're, especially, don't try to have someone force a trade and then they can't play the deck they want. I've seen a lot of people do that working at multiple game stores. It never goes well.
And Noah, how about you?
I mean, I think we as a community do a really good job of embracing like the newer player and kind of going with the ebb and flow of everything. And Fab's usually really good about helping each other out, whether it's getting cards for a tournament or whatever it may be, against all odds, at all costs. And, we kind of pay each other back the way that we can. And, sure, supply chain issues, this and that are going to drive prices up. But I mean, we do a pretty good job of trying to combat that within the community. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that sets us apart from other communities and TCG players is it's just a big family. Like everybody's a sibling. I mean, I love every Fab player. I think it's one of the best communities. But what I'm getting at is play the game for fun first and foremost, and like enjoy what you're doing. Collect to collect, trade to trade with a purpose. Do you know what I mean? Like trade more so than just, well, I'll get this value. Trade with like, oh, I've always wanted to have that, and like I trade with a collector's mindset, like oh man, like I don't have that, and I'm really like I'm envious, I'm jealous, like I want to have that in my collection. Like trade with some kind of purpose to get what you want out of your hobby, which the first and foremost goal is to have fun. And this hobby can reward you by making smart moves. You don't have to buy 1 million copies. It's no one's it's the meta trends and trying to pick up cards to play certain decks, dumping them potentially if you don't like the feel where they're at their highest, so that you're generating some kind of value that you're then going to turn around into something else that's going to bring you enjoyment by playing this deck. So that's what we're trying to kind of teach, is that ebb and flow is going to exist regardless of outside influences. And yes, there are arbitrary inflations, but I point them out. Like I'll even point them out on the podcast. Like, hey, this is probably some kind of arbitrary buyout. Just chill on it for a second. Yeah. But play for a purpose. Just like Will was saying, like we kind of all trade with something in mind. Like you need to trade for a purpose, for the playability, for some kind of goal.
Yeah. Sinclair, how about you?
I would say if you're not having fun, then you might need to find a different type of hobby. Realistically, like collecting's great, but at the end of the day, focus. I would say if you're a new player and you get an expensive, we'll just say you pull 2 tunics from a few packs, right? Sell 1 tunic and trade it at the highest value you can to get more cards to keep playing the game. Focus on building your deck. If you focus on playing the game first, everything else will just genuinely fall into place for you.
That's good advice, man. Look, I appreciate you both coming on. For our listeners, feel free to share your best trade or your biggest loss. I'm always curious, like, do you have a Shelter of the Storm story? Or do you have a, New Horizons bought at $75 and traded for $150? Like, do you have any of these stories? Like, please comment down below. And, thank you guys for everything, for staying tuned for an hour and a half. Do you have any tips for navigating the market, being, coming into the game, doing a learning podcast? that being said, Noah, where can I find you at if I want to reach out to you directly?
Discord's the best way. I'm Big Max on Discord, just BIGMACZ, and then at Big Max Fab on Twitter, at Big Max on Blue Sky. And I open up packs every day except for today because I woke up late and then you got me past midnight. So now I'm late to my
Yeah, I was waiting for that video. I watched all of them.
But and we're doing high C's today too, of course. Why?
You got the Fable coming in that pack, right? Y'all stay tuned for that because he's going to crack the hotness, you know?
Oh, money.
Oh, man, I don't even know what I want. There's a couple of, like, real close-to-heart things I'd want out of a treasure pack, and then there's really cool collector things I want from the actual set.
Yeah, makes sense.
I call dibs on that Herald once you pull one.
And Sinclair, where can they find you at?
You can find me on YouTube and Discord underneath the Big TCG Show. I currently do not sell on Facebook right now, but I eventually will, and it'll be underneath the Big TCG Show.
Yeah. And, you know, what can I say about me? I'm here every week, right? And remember, every turn is a decision, every decision is a story, and don't forget your damn Tunic Counter.
Peace. Take care.
Take care.